The notification chimed on my phone at exactly 11:47 p.m., and everything I thought I knew about my marriage shattered in that single moment. David thought he was so clever, believing our prenuptial agreement was his golden ticket to cheat without consequences. What my brilliant attorney husband didn't realize was that Article 12, buried deep in our contract, contained infidelity penalty clauses that would cost him everything he valued most. I'm Victoria Mitchell, and this is how I used my husband's own legal weapon against him when I discovered his affair with his paralegal Amanda Ross. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The irony wasn't lost on me that David Mitchell, one of Westfield's most respected family law attorneys, had drafted what he thought was an ironclad prenuptial agreement to protect his assets from a potentially messy divorce. What he hadn't counted on was marrying a financial analyst who actually read every single clause, especially the ones he thought were standard legal jargon. That late Thursday night, as autumn rain pelted our colonial home in Westfield Hills, I sat in my home office reviewing quarterly investment reports when my phone buzzed with a text notification that would change everything. The message wasn't meant for me. David's phone was charging on the kitchen counter while he showered upstairs, and somehow our devices had synced to the same cloud account months ago. Amanda Ross had sent him a photo, and the preview that flashed across my screen left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. My hands remained steady as I reached for David's phone, entering his passcode with the same precision I used for financial calculations. 4 years of marriage had taught me his patterns, his habits, his lazy approach to security that would ultimately be his downfall. The affair had been going on for 8 months. Amanda Ross, a 29-year-old paralegal at Sterling & Associates where David worked as a senior partner, had been playing the role of devoted employee while secretly documenting every expensive dinner, every luxury hotel room, every gift David thought he was hiding so cleverly. What struck me most wasn't the betrayal itself, but David's casual arrogance in his messages. He actually believed the prenup made him untouchable, that he could live a double life without financial consequences because he'd structured our marriage contract to protect his premarital assets. I've always been methodical by nature. While other kids played house, I was calculating compound interest on my allowance savings. My career as a senior financial analyst at Sterling Financial Group had been built on pattern recognition, risk assessment, and strategic planning. As I scrolled through months of messages between David and Amanda, my analytical mind automatically began cataloging evidence, noting timestamps, cross-referencing dates with our joint calendar. This wasn't emotional devastation I was feeling. It was professional curiosity about how thoroughly David had incriminated himself. The water stopped running upstairs, and I heard David's familiar footsteps crossing our bedroom floor. I closed his phone, returned it to the kitchen counter, and walked calmly to my office where I kept our important documents in a fireproof safe. The prenuptial agreement was thick, 47 pages of legal language that David had presented to me 6 months before our wedding. He'd insisted it was standard practice for someone in his position, protecting assets he'd accumulated before our relationship. I'd agreed readily, even enthusiastically, because I believed in protecting individual financial security within marriage. Now, as I spread the contract across my mahogany desk under the warm glow of my banker's lamp, I wasn't looking at it as David's trusting fiancé. I was examining it with the sharp eye of someone who'd spent a decade analyzing complex financial documents for hidden risks and opportunities. David had made one critical error in his overconfidence about the prenup's protection. He'd assumed I would never read beyond the basic asset protection clauses, never dig into the penalty sections, never understand the full implications of Article 12. Article 12, titled Dissolution Triggers and Financial Penalties, contained language that David had likely copied from a template without fully considering its ramifications. The section clearly stated that any spouse engaging in extramarital relationships resulting in emotional or financial deception would forfeit their right to protected assets and become liable for substantial financial penalties, including legal fees, damages for emotional distress, and liquidation of jointly held investments with proceeds going entirely to the injured party. My phone buzzed with another message, this time intended for me. David was asking if I wanted anything from the kitchen before bed, his tone casual and loving as always. I responded with equal warmth, suggesting he get some rest since he had court early the next morning. The normalcy of our exchange felt surreal as I continued reading the prenup with new understanding. David had essentially written his own financial death sentence, and Amanda Ross had been unknowingly helping him document every violation. The basement of our home housed David's home office, a masculine space filled with legal tomes and expensive whiskey that he used to impress clients during private consultations. More importantly, it contained his personal filing system where he kept copies of all his professional work, including template contracts he'd used for other clients. I needed to understand whether Article 12 was standard language he used for everyone or something specifically crafted for our situation. Moving quietly through the house, I descended to David's domain and began methodically searching his files. What I discovered was even more damning than I'd hoped. David had used a modified version of Article 12 in dozens of prenups he'd drafted for clients, but our version contained additional clauses that made the penalties more severe. He'd been so focused on protecting his assets from me that he'd inadvertently created a legal trap for himself. The irony was delicious and devastating. His computer was password protected, but David's legendary arrogance extended to his cybersecurity. The password was our wedding date, followed by his initials, hardly the sophisticated approach one would expect from a family law attorney. His email account revealed the true scope of his relationship with Amanda, including detailed discussions about how the prenup would protect him if I ever discovered his affairs. Multiple affairs, I learned, as Amanda wasn't his first extramarital adventure, just his most recent and most documented. The clock on David's computer showed 2:17 a.m. when I finally finished my initial investigation. 8 months of evidence, dozens of incriminating emails, credit card statements showing charges at hotels and restaurants on days David claimed to be working late at the office. He'd been funding his double life with money from our joint accounts. Another violation of the prenup that he'd apparently forgotten about in his enthusiasm for cheating. I returned to my office and began creating a comprehensive timeline of David's deception, cross-referencing his messages with financial records, calendar entries, and business expenses. My background in forensic financial analysis made this process almost automatic. Every dinner with Amanda that he'd claimed as a business expense, every hotel room charged to our joint credit card, every gift he'd bought her using funds that the prenup specifically designated for household expenses only. The prenuptial agreement contained another clause that David had clearly forgotten about in his rush to protect his individual assets. Section 15 detailed the process for prenup enforcement, requiring both parties to maintain financial transparency and honest communication about any circumstances that might affect the contract's validity. David's secret relationship with Amanda, funded through deception and false expense reporting, constituted a massive breach of this transparency requirement. By dawn, I had assembled a preliminary case that would have impressed any prosecutor. David had violated the prenup in multiple ways, and each violation carried specific financial penalties that he'd apparently never calculated. The protected assets he thought were safe would become available for seizure under the contract's penalty clauses. His partnership stake in Sterling and Associates, his investment portfolio, even his prized collection of vintage legal texts could be claimed as compensation for his breach of contract. The morning sun filtered through the windows of my office as I heard David's alarm clock begin its familiar routine upstairs. Soon he would shower, dress in one of his expensive suits, and head to work, where he would spend the day advising clients about family law while living as a walking violation of his own legal principles. The thought brought a smile to my face as I carefully filed away all the evidence I'd gathered during my sleepless night of investigation. David appeared in the kitchen at exactly 7:15 a.m., impeccably dressed and cheerfully oblivious to the storm, gathering around him. He kissed my cheek with the same casual affection he'd shown every morning for 4 years, asked about my plans for the day, and reminded me about dinner with his partners at the country club tomorrow evening. His performance was flawless, the devoted husband maintaining perfect domestic harmony while pursuing his secret life with Amanda Ross. I smiled and poured his coffee into the travel mug I'd bought him for his last birthday, the one engraved, with "World's Best Husband," that now felt like evidence of my own naivety. He thanked me with genuine warmth, gathered his briefcase and car keys, and headed out to face a day that would be his last as the comfortable, confident cheater who thought he'd outsmarted his own legal expertise. As his BMW disappeared down our tree-lined street, I opened my laptop and began researching the best forensic accountants in Connecticut. If David wanted to play legal games with our marriage, I would give him a masterclass in how a financial analyst approaches complex litigation. The prenup he'd crafted so carefully to protect himself was about to become the instrument of his complete professional and personal destruction. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Jessica Chen, a divorce attorney in Stamford who'd been encouraging me to trust my instincts about David's suspicious behavior for months. "Coffee this morning?" she'd written, followed by a winking emoji. Jessica had no idea how perfectly timed her invitation was, or how much I was going to need her professional expertise in the coming weeks. I texted back immediately, suggesting we meet at Harbor View Restaurant, where Amanda and David had enjoyed their romantic dinner just 3 nights ago, according to his credit card statements. The poetic justice of discussing my divorce strategy in the same location where my husband had been planning his escape from our marriage seemed too perfect to resist. Jessica agreed enthusiastically, probably sensing that something significant had shifted in my usually measured tone. Before leaving the house, I made one final sweep of David's home office, this time photographing documents and creating digital copies of anything that might be relevant to proving his prenup violations. His partnership agreement with Sterling and associates revealed that adultery clauses were standard in professional legal partnerships, meaning his affair with Amanda could cost him his career as well as his assets. David hadn't just been cheating on me, he'd been violating the ethical standards that governed his entire profession. The drive to Harbor View took me through the heart of Westfield's historic district, past the courthouse where David had argued so many family law cases, past the offices where he'd built his reputation as a fierce advocate for protecting assets during divorce proceedings. In a few hours, I would begin the process of using his own expertise against him, turning every legal strategy he'd employed for his clients into a weapon aimed at his own financial security. Harbor View Restaurant overlooked the Connecticut River, its elegant dining room filled with the kind of affluent professionals who made up Westfield's social elite. I arrived early and requested a table by the windows, the same spot where David and Amanda had shared intimate dinners while planning their future together. The irony of the location wasn't lost on the hostess, who recognized me as Mrs. Mitchell, and commented on how romantic it was that David and I were dining there so frequently. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Jessica arrived precisely on time, her sharp business attire and confident stride marking her as the formidable attorney who'd built her practice representing high-net-worth women in complex divorces. She took one look at my face and immediately understood that this wasn't a casual coffee meeting between friends. Without waiting for explanation, she ordered her usual cappuccino and settled into the chair across from me with the focused attention she reserved for her most important clients. I began by showing her the prenuptial agreement, watching her eyebrows rise as she read through Article 12 and the penalty clauses that David had so carelessly included in our contract. Jessica had reviewed the prenup before our wedding at my request, But neither of us had anticipated needing to examine it from the perspective of enforcement rather than protection. Her legal mind immediately grasped the implications of David's violations and the financial consequences he was facing. The evidence I presented next left Jessica momentarily speechless, a rare occurrence for someone who'd built her career on quick thinking and strategic communication. The timeline of David's affair, the financial documentation, the email evidence, and the clear pattern of prenup violations created a case that was both devastating and legally airtight. David hadn't just cheated on his wife, he'd systematically violated a legal contract while creating a detailed record of his own misconduct. Jessica leaned back in her chair and smiled with the satisfaction of a professional who'd just been handed the perfect case. "Victoria," she said quietly, "your husband didn't just write his own prenup. He wrote his own legal obituary." She began outlining the strategy we could employ, the forensic accountants we'd need to hire, the timeline for building an unassailable case that would leave David with no room for legal maneuvering or financial protection. The morning sun reflected off the river as we discussed the specifics of Article 12 enforcement, the process for asset seizure under prenup penalty clauses, and the professional consequences David would face when his affair became public knowledge. Jessica estimated that the financial penalties alone would exceed $2 million, not including legal fees and the potential loss of his partnership stake in Sterling and Associates. My phone buzzed with a message from David, a casual inquiry about dinner plans that evening, and a reminder that he'd be working late again. I showed the message to Jessica, who laughed at the complete disconnect between David's perceived security and the reality of his situation. He was still playing the role of devoted husband while building evidence for his own destruction with every lie he told and every secret meeting he scheduled. As our meeting concluded, Jessica handed me her card with a handwritten note on the Parwista, call me tonight. We start Monday morning and David Mitchell is about to learn why Article 12 exists. She gathered her things and headed back to her office to begin preliminary research on the forensic accounting firms we'd need to hire, leaving me alone at the table where my husband had planned his escape from our marriage. I sat for several minutes watching the river flow past Harbor View's windows, processing the transformation that had occurred in less than 12 hours. Yesterday, I had been Victoria Mitchell, devoted wife and financial analyst living in comfortable suburban contentment. Today, I was Victoria Mitchell, strategic prosecutor armed with legal weapons that my own husband had unknowingly provided. The prenup David thought protected him was about to become the foundation for the most expensive lesson in family law that Westfield had ever witnessed. The weekend arrived with unseasonable warmth for October in Connecticut, and David announced his plans for a golf outing at Pine Ridge with his law partners. What he didn't mention was that Amanda Ross would be joining them for what the club records would show as a business discussion about upcoming cases. I learned this detail through my own investigation into his credit card activity, which revealed a pattern of weekend charges that coincided perfectly with Amanda's social media posts from various upscale locations around Westfield. I spent Saturday morning in my home office, systematically reviewing 3 years of financial records with the methodical approach that had made me successful in forensic accounting. Every business dinner David had claimed, every conference he'd attended, every client meeting that had run unusually late now took on new significance when cross-referenced with Amanda's employment records and social media activity. The picture emerging was of a man who had been living a carefully orchestrated double life, funded by our joint resources and justified through an elaborate system of professional excuses. The prenuptial agreement lay open beside my computer, its pages now marked with highlighter and sticky notes as I identified each clause that David had violated. Article 12 wasn't the only section that worked against him. Section 7 dealt with financial disclosure requirements, mandating that both spouses maintain transparency about all expenditures exceeding $500. David's secret dinners, hotel rooms, and gifts to Amanda constituted dozens of violations. Of this requirement alone, each carrying its own penalty structure, Section 15 proved even more damaging to David's position. This clause established that any spouse who engaged in deceptive practices regarding marital assets would forfeit all claims to protected property. David had been so focused on shielding his premarital investments from potential divorce proceedings that he'd forgotten this section essentially created a legal trap for anyone who tried to fund infidelity through joint accounts. My analysis revealed that David had spent over $40,000 on his relationship with Amanda during the past 8 months. Restaurant bills averaging $300 per meal, hotel rooms at luxury establishments in Hartford and New Haven, jewelry purchases that had never appeared in our home, weekend trips disguised as legal conferences that Amanda's employment records showed she had also attended. Every dollar spent represented a violation of multiple prenup clauses, and the cumulative effect was financially devastating. The most damning evidence came from David's professional credit card, which he used for what he believed were legitimate business expenses. Amanda appeared on these statements as well, listed as a professional consultant for various client meetings that my research revealed had never actually occurred. David hadn't just been cheating on me, he'd been defrauding his own law firm by billing personal expenses as business costs. This discovery elevated his misconduct from marital betrayal to professional malpractice with potential criminal implications. Sunday morning brought an unexpected opportunity when David announced he needed to review case files at the office for Monday's court appearances. He left the house at 9 a.m., giving me several hours of uninterrupted access to his personal computer and filing systems. I'd prepared a comprehensive checklist of documents and digital files that would strengthen my case, approaching the task with the same thoroughness I used for major financial audits at work. David's computer contained 3 years of email correspondence with Amanda, beginning with seemingly innocent professional exchanges and gradually developing into explicit planning of their affair. The early messages showed Amanda asking for career advice and David positioning himself as a mentor figure. Within months, their communication had evolved into detailed discussions of hotel reservations, weekend getaways, and David's confidence that our prenup would protect him from any consequences if their relationship was discovered. One email thread proved particularly revealing. Amanda had expressed concerns about the ethics of their relationship, given their professional connection and David's marriage. His response demonstrated a stunning level of arrogance and legal miscalculation. He assured her that the prenuptial agreement made him essentially judgment-proof in any divorce proceeding, that he could maintain his lifestyle and assets regardless of any marital complications. He even included specific references to sections of the prenup that he claimed protected his investments and partnership stake in the law firm. David's confidence was based on a fundamental misunderstanding of his own contract. He had focused exclusively on the asset protection clauses while ignoring the penalty sections that could strip away those protections entirely. His emails to Amanda revealed that he'd never actually calculated the financial consequences of violating the agreement's disclosure and fidelity requirements. The man who'd built his career advising clients about family law had become a walking example of how overconfidence could lead to catastrophic legal mistakes. The computer search also revealed David's financial planning documents, including investment portfolios and retirement accounts that he believed were shielded from any divorce settlement. His net worth exceeded $4 million, built through careful investing and his partnership in one of Westfield's most prestigious law firms. What David hadn't realized was that Article 12's penalty structure could potentially claim all of these assets as compensation for his breach of contract, leaving him with nothing but debt and professional ruin. Amanda's employment file, accessible through the law firm's shared network system, painted a picture of a woman who had been systematically promoted beyond her qualifications during the months of her relationship with David. Her salary had increased by 60% in 8 months, along with bonuses and professional development opportunities that other paralegals hadn't received. This evidence suggested that David had been using his position at the firm to benefit his mistress, creating additional ethical violations that could result in professional sanctions or disbarment. The most shocking discovery came from David's personal calendar, which contained detailed planning for a 2-week vacation to Europe that he intended to take with Amanda during the Christmas holidays. He had already made reservations for luxury hotels in Paris and Rome, purchased first-class airline tickets, and arranged for extended time away from the law firm. The total cost exceeded $25,000, all charged to our joint travel account that was intended for family vacations. David was planning to celebrate the new year in European luxury with his mistress, using money that belonged to both of us. My phone buzzed with a text message from David, sent from the law firm's offices where he was supposedly reviewing case files. The message contained a photo of legal documents spread across his desk, along with a caption about how much work he had to complete before Monday morning. The timestamp showed 11:47 a.m., but the metadata revealed that the photo had actually been taken 3 days earlier. David was sending me fake evidence of his whereabouts while actually spending Sunday with Amanda at their favorite hotel in Hartford. This level of deception went far beyond simple infidelity. David was actively constructing elaborate lies to conceal his activities, creating false evidence to support his alibis, and using sophisticated methods to hide his financial transactions. His behavior suggested someone who had been planning this double life for months, perhaps years, with careful attention to avoiding detection. The methodical nature of his deception made his violation of the prenup even more egregious under the contract's terms. I spent the remainder of Sunday afternoon creating digital copies of every relevant document I'd discovered, organizing the evidence according to the prenup's penalty structure and violation categories. Each piece of evidence was cataloged with timestamps, financial amounts, and specific references to the contract clauses that David had violated. The resulting file contained over 200 individual pieces of evidence, creating an overwhelming case for prenup enforcement that would be impossible for David to dispute or explain away. The financial calculations were staggering. Under Article 12's penalty structure, David's violations could result in the forfeiture of his entire investment, portfolio, his partnership stake in the law firm, and his claim to our jointly owned properties. Additional penalties for deception and financial fraud could exceed $500,000 in direct compensation to me, not including legal fees and court costs that David would be required to pay under the contract's enforcement provisions. Monday morning arrived with the crisp autumn air that made Westfield's tree-lined streets particularly beautiful. David left for work with his usual confident stride, briefcase in hand, and expensive suit perfectly tailored. He kissed me goodbye with the same casual affection he'd shown every morning for 4 years, completely unaware that his world was about to collapse around him. His final comment before leaving was a reminder about our dinner plans with his law partners that evening, an event that would take on new significance given what I now knew about his relationship with Amanda. After David's departure, I called Jessica Chen to schedule an emergency meeting for later that morning. Her secretary immediately cleared her calendar when I mentioned that new evidence had emerged over the weekend, recognizing the urgency in my voice. Jessica had been handling complex divorce cases for over 15 years, but she admitted later that she'd never seen such comprehensive documentation of prenup violations assembled by the injured party herself. The evidence I presented to Jessica that Monday morning left her momentarily speechless for the second time in our professional relationship. The financial records, email correspondence, employment documentation, and travel planning created a case that was both morally compelling and legally devastating. David hadn't just violated his marriage vows, he'd systematically breached every major provision of a legal contract while creating detailed documentation of his own misconduct. Jessica's analysis of the evidence confirmed my own calculations about the financial penalties David was facing. Under Connecticut family law and the specific terms of our prenuptial agreement, his violations could result in the complete forfeiture of assets he'd spent years accumulating. The penalty structure was designed to be punitive rather than merely compensatory, reflecting the legal principle that breach of contract should carry consequences severe enough to deter future violations. The meeting concluded with Jessica's commitment to begin formal proceedings within the week. She would coordinate with forensic accountants to establish the full scope of David's financial deception, work with private investigators to document any additional evidence of his relationship with Amanda, and prepare the legal framework for enforcing every penalty clause in our prenuptial agreement. David's confidence in his legal immunity was about to be tested in the most expensive way possible. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected phone call that would accelerate my timeline significantly. Margaret Sterling, my mother, called from her home in Westfield's historic district with news that would prove both shocking and strategically valuable. As a retired family court judge with 30 years of experience, she had maintained close relationships with the legal community and possessed an insider's perspective on professional misconduct cases. Mother had learned through her network of former colleagues that David was under informal investigation by the Connecticut Bar Association for potential ethical violations related to his relationship with Amanda Ross. Someone at Sterling and Associates had filed a confidential complaint alleging that David was misusing his position to benefit a subordinate employee, creating conflicts of interest that violated professional conduct standards. The investigation was still preliminary, but it suggested that David's misconduct extended beyond our marriage into his professional life. This information transformed my strategic approach entirely. Rather than simply pursuing prenup enforcement, through family court, I now had the opportunity to coordinate with professional disciplinary proceedings that could strip David of his license to practice law. The financial penalties from our contract violations would be devastating, but the loss of his legal career would ensure that he could never rebuild his wealth or professional reputation. Mother's call also revealed that she had been suspicious of David's behavior for months, particularly his frequent absences from community events and his evasive responses when asked about his work schedule. As someone who had spent decades observing human behavior in family court, she had recognized the signs of marital deception long before I'd discovered the concrete evidence. Her offer to provide both emotional support and professional guidance represented a significant strategic advantage. The conversation with Mother lasted over an hour, during which she outlined the various legal approaches available for addressing David's misconduct. Her experience with prenuptial agreement enforcement cases provided valuable insights into how judges typically approached penalty clauses and asset forfeiture provisions. She also shared details about David's professional reputation within the legal community, information that would prove crucial for understanding how his colleagues might respond to revelations about his behavior. After ending the call with Mother, I spent the remainder of Tuesday morning researching the Connecticut Bar Association's disciplinary procedures and the potential consequences David faced if the ethical investigation proceeded. Loss of license would not only end his legal career, but would also trigger additional penalties under his partnership agreement with Sterling and Associates. The firm's ethical standards required partners to maintain clean professional records, and any disciplinary action would result in immediate termination and forfeiture of partnership assets. The timing of these revelations was perfect from a strategic standpoint. David was scheduled to present oral arguments in a high-profile family law case on Friday, representing a wealthy client in a complex divorce proceeding. His professional reputation was already under scrutiny due to the Bar Association investigation, and any public exposure of his personal misconduct would destroy his credibility as a family law expert. The irony of David losing his career while arguing someone else's divorce case was too perfect to ignore. Wednesday brought another unexpected development when Sarah Williams, a junior associate at Sterling and Associates, contacted me through a mutual friend with information about David's workplace behavior. Sarah had been working late on case preparations when she witnessed David and Amanda in his office after hours, engaged in activities that were clearly personal rather than professional. Her decision to come forward was motivated by concerns about the firm's reputation and her own professional integrity. Sarah's testimony would provide crucial evidence for both the prenup enforcement case and any potential criminal charges related to David's misuse of firm resources. She had documented dates and times of David's inappropriate behavior, including instances where he had dismissed other staff members early to create privacy for his meetings with Amanda. Her evidence also revealed that David had been billing clients for time spent with Amanda on personal matters, constituting fraud against both his clients and his law firm. The conversation with Sarah lasted over 2 hours, during which she provided detailed accounts of David's transformation from respected partner to someone who routinely violated professional standards. She described how Amanda had been given preferential treatment in work assignments, salary increases, and professional development opportunities that other employees hadn't received. The pattern of favoritism was so obvious that several staff members had begun making jokes about Amanda's rapid advancement within the firm. Sarah's most damning revelation concerned David's handling of client confidentiality during his relationship with Amanda. On several occasions, he had discussed sensitive case details with her despite her lack of clearance for such information. This breach of attorney-client privilege represented a serious ethical violation that could result in malpractice lawsuits and additional criminal charges. David's infidelity had led him to compromise the fundamental principles of legal practice. Thursday morning brought a strategic decision that would define the next phase of my plan. Rather than proceeding immediately with prenup enforcement, I chose to coordinate my actions with the ongoing professional investigation to maximize the impact on David's career and financial security. This approach would require careful timing and coordination with multiple parties, but it offered the potential for complete destruction of David's professional and personal life. The decision to wait also allowed me to gather additional evidence and prepare for David's inevitable counterattack once he realized his situation. Jessica Chen had warned me that David would likely attempt to negotiate or manipulate the proceedings once he understood the scope of the evidence against him. By waiting until all pieces were in place, I could prevent him from taking protective actions that might preserve some of his assets or professional standing. Thursday afternoon brought an opportunity to test David's awareness of the gathering. Storm when he mentioned casually over dinner that one of his colleagues had asked him about rumors circulating within the legal community. David's dismissive response suggested that he either didn't understand the seriousness of the situation or was attempting to project confidence while privately worrying about the implications. His performance that evening was flawless. The devoted husband discussing his day at work with no hint of the chaos surrounding his professional life. The evening also provided an opportunity to observe David's interaction with Amanda when she called during dinner with what she claimed was an urgent case question. Their conversation was brief and professional, but the underlying tension was obvious to someone who knew about their relationship. David's carefully controlled responses and Amanda's nervous tone suggested that they were both aware of increased scrutiny, but hadn't yet grasped the full extent of the evidence being assembled against them. Friday morning arrived with news that would accelerate my timeline beyond anything I had planned. Jessica Chen called at 7 a.m. with information that David's oral arguments had been postponed indefinitely due to questions about his fitness to represent clients. The Connecticut Bar Association had apparently expanded their investigation based on new evidence, and David's clients were being advised to seek alternative representation for pending cases. This development meant that David's professional crisis was becoming public knowledge within the legal community, creating an immediate threat to his partnership at Sterling & Associates and his ability to practice law. The timing was perfect for revealing the personal misconduct evidence, as it would appear to be part of a broader pattern of ethical violations, rather than simply marital problems. David's carefully constructed professional image was already cracking, and my evidence would shatter it completely. The phone call with Jessica also revealed that the forensic accountant she had hired had completed his preliminary analysis of David's financial records. The scope of his violations exceeded even my own calculations, with evidence of systematic fraud spanning 3 years and involving multiple accounts and credit facilities. David hadn't just been funding his affair. Through our joint resources, he'd been using elaborate financial schemes to hide the true extent of his spending from both me and his law firm. Friday afternoon brought David home from work earlier than usual, his normally confident demeanor replaced by obvious stress and anxiety. His explanation that court schedules had been adjusted was technically accurate, but failed to mention the professional crisis that was destroying his career. That evening, as we sat in our living room overlooking Westfield's autumn landscape, David had no idea that his wife was methodically planning the complete destruction of everything he valued most in life. The weekend would bring the final phase of evidence gathering before Jessica and I launched our coordinated attack on David's assets, career, and reputation. His confidence in the prenuptial agreement's protection was about to be tested in ways he had never imagined, and the results would prove that his legal expertise hadn't protected him from his own arrogance and stupidity. Monday morning brought an unexpected ally in the form of Ryan Sterling, my brother and one of Connecticut's most respected private investigators. Ryan had built his career handling complex financial fraud cases for insurance companies and corporate clients, developing expertise in digital forensics and asset tracking that would prove invaluable for exposing the full scope of David's deception. His call came at precisely the right moment, as Jessica and I were preparing to expand our investigation beyond the evidence I'd already assembled. Ryan's involvement began when Mother mentioned our situation during their regular Sunday dinner, describing the prenup violations and professional misconduct without revealing specific details. As someone who specialized in investigating financial crimes, Ryan immediately recognized the potential criminal implications of David's behavior and offered his professional services to ensure that no evidence was overlooked or improperly handled. His expertise would prove crucial for building a case that could withstand David's inevitable attempts at legal maneuvering. The meeting between Ryan, Jessica, and myself took place Tuesday morning at Ryan's offices in downtown Stamford, a secure facility equipped with the latest digital forensics equipment and privacy protections. Ryan's initial review of the evidence I'd assembled confirmed my own analysis while identifying additional investigative opportunities that my financial background hadn't revealed. His professional assessment was that David's misconduct constituted one of the most comprehensive cases of marital and professional fraud he'd encountered in 15 years of investigation. Ryan's examination of David's digital communications revealed sophisticated efforts to conceal his relationship with Amanda, including the use of encrypted messaging apps and carefully timed deletion of incriminating evidence. However, David's technical skills hadn't been sufficient to eliminate all traces of his activities, and Ryan's forensic tools recovered dozens of deleted messages and files that provided additional evidence of the affair and its financial implications. The most significant discovery came from David's smartphone, which contained location data that contradicted his alibis for dozens of occasions when he claimed to be working late or attending professional events. The phone's GPS tracking showed frequent visits to Amanda's apartment, extended stays at luxury hotels, and weekend trips to romantic destinations that had never been mentioned in our conversations about his work schedule. This digital evidence created an irrefutable timeline of deception that David would be unable to explain or dispute. Ryan's analysis also revealed that David had been using multiple credit cards and bank accounts to fund his relationship with Amanda, including several accounts that I hadn't known existed. These hidden financial resources suggested premeditation in his infidelity, as he had clearly planned to keep his affair secret by compartmentalizing its costs away from our joint financial records. The discovery of these accounts also revealed additional prenup violations related to financial disclosure requirements. Wednesday brought another crucial ally when Dr. Emma Foster, a licensed marriage counselor who had been recommended by Jessica, agreed to provide professional consultation on the psychological aspects of David's behavior. Dr. Foster's expertise in adultery cases and financial deception would strengthen our legal arguments, while providing credible testimony about the emotional damages that David's conduct had caused. Her involvement also established a foundation for claiming substantial compensation under the prenup's emotional distress provisions. Dr. Foster's initial consultation revealed that David's pattern of behavior exhibited characteristics of narcissistic personality disorder, particularly his apparent belief that rules and ethical standards didn't apply to him. Her analysis suggested that David's confidence in his legal immunity wasn't just arrogance, but represented a fundamental inability to recognize the consequences of his actions. This psychological profile would prove valuable for explaining how an experienced family law attorney could make such catastrophic mistakes in his personal life. The consultation with Dr. Foster also provided insights into Amanda's role in the affair and her potential liability under various legal theories. As a paralegal with professional training in legal ethics, Amanda had knowingly participated in conduct that violated professional standards and potentially criminal statutes. Her cooperation with David's deception made her a co-conspirator rather than simply a mistress, opening additional avenues for legal action and asset recovery. Thursday morning brought news that would prove pivotal for our strategy when Michael Torres, the forensic accountant hired by Jessica, completed his comprehensive analysis of David's financial activities. Michael's report revealed that David's violations of the prenuptial agreement were even more extensive than we had calculated, with evidence of systematic fraud spanning 4 years and involving multiple institutions and accounts. Michael's investigation had uncovered evidence that David had been diverting funds from client trust accounts to finance his personal activities, including his relationship with Amanda. This discovery elevated his misconduct from simple marital infidelity to potential criminal embezzlement, creating exposure to federal charges and mandatory prison sentences. David's legal expertise had apparently convinced him that he could manipulate trust account procedures without detection. But Michael's forensic analysis revealed clear evidence of illegal transfers and falsified documentation. The forensic accounting report also revealed that David had been systematically underreporting his income to minimize our joint tax liability, while secretly accumulating wealth in hidden accounts. This tax fraud created additional criminal exposure and violated multiple provisions of our prenuptial agreement related to financial honesty and transparency. The Internal Revenue Service would undoubtedly be interested in David's creative accounting methods, adding federal tax charges to his growing list of legal problems. Michael's analysis identified over $300,000 in diverted funds that could be traced directly to David's affair with Amanda, including payments for jewelry, travel, and luxury accommodations. Each transaction represented a violation of multiple legal and ethical standards, creating a comprehensive case for both prenup enforcement and criminal prosecution. David's efforts to fund his double life had generated enough evidence to destroy both his marriage and his freedom. Friday brought the final piece of our alliance when Detective Lisa Rodriguez from the Connecticut State Police Financial Crimes Unit agreed to review our evidence for potential criminal charges. Detective Rodriguez had built her career prosecuting white-collar criminals and was particularly interested in cases involving attorney misconduct and trust account violations. Her involvement would ensure that David faced criminal consequences, in addition to the civil penalties under our prenuptial agreement. Detective Rodriguez's preliminary review of our evidence confirmed that David's conduct met the standards for multiple felony charges, including embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. Her analysis suggested that David could face up to 20 years in federal prison if convicted on all charges, making his violations of our prenuptial agreement seem minor in comparison to his criminal exposure. The involvement of law enforcement also meant that David's assets could be frozen pending investigation, preventing him from taking protective measures once he realized his situation. The detective's investigation also focused on Amanda's role in David's financial crimes, particularly her knowledge of trust account violations and her participation in schemes to hide diverted funds. As a paralegal with professional training, in legal ethics, Amanda faced potential criminal charges and professional sanctions that could end her career and result in substantial prison sentences. Her cooperation with law enforcement might reduce her charges, but it would also provide additional evidence against David. The coordination between our civil case and the criminal investigation created a comprehensive strategy that would prevent David from escaping consequences through legal maneuvering or plea negotiations. The prenup enforcement proceedings would claim his assets, while the criminal charges would ensure prison sentences and professional sanctions. David's confidence in his legal immunity was about to be tested by a coordinated attack from multiple directions that would leave him with no avenue for escape or mitigation. Saturday brought a family meeting at Mother's house, where our complete strategy was reviewed and finalized. The assembled team included Jessica Chen, Ryan Sterling, Michael Torres, Dr. Emma Foster, and Detective Lisa Rodriguez, creating an unprecedented alliance of legal, investigative, and psychological expertise focused on ensuring that David faced appropriate consequences for his misconduct. Mother's experience as a family court judge provided valuable insights into how our strategy would be received by the judicial system. The meeting concluded with a detailed timeline for revealing our evidence and initiating both civil and criminal proceedings. David's world would begin collapsing the following Monday, when Jessica filed the prenup enforcement action in family court. Detective Rodriguez would execute search warrants for David's offices and accounts on Tuesday, while the Connecticut Bar Association would receive formal complaints about his professional misconduct on Wednesday. By the end of the week, David would face complete personal, professional, and criminal destruction. Sunday evening brought David home from another supposed work session at the law firm, his demeanor suggesting that he sensed something had changed but couldn't identify the specific threat. His performance that evening was flawless as always, the devoted husband discussing mundane domestic matters while secretly planning his next rendezvous with Amanda. David had no idea that his final week of freedom was about to begin, or that the prenuptial agreement he trusted for protection was about to become the instrument of his complete downfall. The investigation took an unexpected turn Monday morning, when Ryan's forensic analysis of David's computer revealed encrypted files that required specialized software to decode. These files contained financial records that David had apparently thought were permanently hidden, documenting a pattern of misconduct that extended far beyond his relationship with Amanda Ross. The encrypted data revealed that David had been operating multiple schemes to defraud clients, colleagues, and financial institutions while using our marriage as cover for his criminal activities. Ryan's decryption process uncovered evidence that David had been systematically overcharging clients for legal services while providing substandard representation, pocketing the difference through elaborate billing schemes. His client trust account violations were more extensive than Michael Torres had initially discovered, involving dozens of clients whose funds had been diverted to support David's lifestyle and his affair with Amanda. The scope of his professional misconduct suggested that David had been operating essentially as a criminal enterprise disguised as a respected law practice. The encrypted files also revealed David's involvement in real estate fraud schemes with several prominent Westfield developers, using his legal expertise to structure transactions that illegally benefited him at the expense of his clients. These deals involved millions of dollars in property transfers and development projects, with David receiving substantial kickbacks that had never been reported to tax authorities or disclosed to his law firm partners. His participation in these schemes created additional criminal exposure and violated numerous professional ethics rules. Tuesday brought a shocking discovery when Ryan's investigation revealed that David had been blackmailing several of his wealthy clients using confidential information obtained during legal representation. The encrypted files contained detailed records of these extortion schemes, including photographs and documents that David had gathered to ensure his victims' cooperation. This evidence revealed a level of criminal sophistication that transformed David from an unfaithful husband into a career criminal who had been using his law practice as a front for multiple illegal enterprises. The blackmail evidence included records of payments totaling over $2 million that David had extracted from clients over the past 3 years. These funds had been used to purchase luxury items, fund his affair with Amanda, and invest in offshore accounts that were designed to hide his criminal proceeds from law enforcement and tax authorities. David's victims included several prominent Westfield families who had trusted him with their most sensitive legal matters, only to become targets for his criminal schemes. Jessica Chen's analysis of the blackmail evidence revealed that David's Victims would likely cooperate with law enforcement in exchange for protection from public exposure of their secrets. This cooperation would provide additional testimony against David while demonstrating the breadth of his criminal activities to prosecutors and judges. The involvement of multiple victims would also ensure that David faced separate charges for each blackmail scheme, increasing his potential prison sentence to life imprisonment. Wednesday's developments revealed the international scope of David's criminal activities when Ryan discovered evidence of money laundering through offshore banking systems in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands. David had apparently been using his legal expertise to structure complex financial transactions that moved his criminal proceeds through multiple jurisdictions to avoid detection by American law enforcement. These international crimes would trigger federal prosecution and potentially extradition proceedings if David attempted to flee the country. The offshore banking evidence revealed that David had accumulated over $5 million in hidden assets through his various criminal schemes, money that was completely separate from the $4 million in legitimate assets that I had discovered during my initial investigation. This hidden wealth meant that the financial penalties under our prenuptial agreement would be far more devastating than David had calculated, as the contract's forfeiture provisions would apply to all of his assets regardless of their source or location. Michael Torres's expanded forensic analysis revealed that David had been using Amanda Ross as more than just a mistress, but as an active participant in his money laundering operations. Amanda had opened multiple bank accounts using false identification, documents that David had helped her obtain, allowing them to move criminal proceeds through the banking system without triggering suspicious activity reports. Her participation in these schemes made her a full partner in David's criminal enterprise rather than simply a victim of his manipulation. Thursday brought evidence that David's criminal activities had attracted the attention of federal law enforcement agencies before our investigation began. Detective Rodriguez's contacts at the FBI revealed that David had been under surveillance for several months as part of a broader investigation into corruption within Connecticut's legal community. Our evidence would complement the federal investigation, while ensuring that David faced both state and federal charges for his misconduct. The federal investigation had already identified several of David's criminal associates, including corrupt judges and prosecutors who had been accepting bribes in exchange for favorable rulings in David's cases. This corruption network had allowed David to operate his criminal schemes with impunity while building his reputation as one of Westfield's most successful attorneys. The federal charges would include racketeering allegations that could result in mandatory life imprisonment under federal sentencing guidelines. Friday's revelations proved to be the most shocking when Ryan's investigation uncovered evidence that David had been planning to murder me to prevent discovery of his criminal activities. The encrypted files contained detailed research into methods for causing accidental deaths, including information about untraceable poisons and staged accidents. David had apparently decided that eliminating me was preferable to facing exposure of his crimes, making our prenup enforcement case a matter of life and death rather than simply financial recovery. The murder planning evidence included surveillance, records that David had compiled about my daily routines, including my routes to work, shopping habits, and exercise schedule. He had also researched my life insurance policies and the procedures for claiming death benefits, suggesting that he viewed my murder as a profitable solution to his legal problems. This evidence elevated the case from financial fraud to attempted murder, ensuring that David would face the most serious criminal charges available under Connecticut law. Jessica's analysis of the murder planning evidence revealed that David had been consulting with criminal associates about the best methods for eliminating me without arousing suspicion. These communications provided additional evidence of conspiracy charges while demonstrating the premeditated nature of his plans. The involvement of criminal associates also suggested that David had been planning to use professional killers rather than attempting the murder himself, indicating a level of criminal sophistication that would shock the Westfield community. The weekend brought a strategic decision to accelerate our timeline given the evidence of David's murder plans. Detective Rodriguez coordinated with federal agents to ensure that David was arrested before he could implement his plans to eliminate me The arrest would occur Monday morning at his law office, ensuring maximum publicity for his downfall while protecting me from immediate danger. The comprehensive evidence we had assembled revealed that David Mitchell wasn't simply an unfaithful husband who had violated his prenuptial agreement, but a career criminal who had been using his marriage and law practice as cover for an extensive criminal enterprise. His confidence in the prenup's protection had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how criminal forfeiture laws would interact with our contract's penalty provisions. David was about to learn that his legal expertise hadn't prepared him for the reality of facing federal racketeering charges while losing everything he had worked to build. The prenuptial agreement that David had crafted so carefully to protect his assets would prove to be irrelevant once federal prosecutors seized all of his property as proceeds of criminal activity. His $4 million in legitimate assets and $5 million in hidden criminal proceeds would both be forfeited to the government, leaving him with nothing but massive legal bills and guaranteed prison sentences. The man who had thought he could manipulate the legal system to his advantage was about to become its most prominent victim in recent Connecticut history. Eleanor Mitchell had always been a formidable woman, but I had never fully appreciated the steel beneath her elegant exterior until she appeared at my front door Tuesday morning with a briefcase full of documents and a look of grim determination that transformed her aristocratic features into something far more dangerous. David's mother had spent 40 years building the social and financial foundation that her son was now systematically destroying, and her decision to join forces against him represented a shift in family dynamics that would prove devastating to his remaining support systems. The revelation that Eleanor had been monitoring David's activities independently came as a complete shock, though it shouldn't have surprised me given her background as the daughter of a federal prosecutor and the widow of a Connecticut Supreme Court justice. Her social connections throughout Westfield's elite circles had provided her with information that even Ryan's professional investigation hadn't uncovered, including details about David's criminal associates and their connections to organized crime families operating throughout New England. Eleanor's briefcase contained photographs, financial records, and correspondence that documented David's descent into criminality with the thoroughness of someone who understood the importance of proper evidence gathering. Her decision to investigate her own son had been triggered by suspicious changes in his behavior and spending patterns that she'd noticed during family gatherings over the past 2 years. As someone who had spent decades navigating Connecticut's political and legal establishment, she recognized the signs of corruption and criminal activity that others might have dismissed as professional success. The most valuable information Eleanor provided concerned David's relationship with Vincent Carradine, a Providence-based money launderer who specialized in cleaning proceeds from white-collar crimes for prominent professionals throughout New England. Eleanor's photographs showed David meeting with Carradine at exclusive restaurants and private clubs, locations where their conversations couldn't be monitored by law enforcement surveillance. These meetings had been occurring monthly for over 2 years, suggesting a sophisticated and ongoing criminal partnership. Eleanor's investigation had also revealed that David's law firm partnership was being used as a front for Carradine's money laundering operations, with legitimate legal fees being mixed with criminal proceeds to create an apparently clean income stream. This arrangement had allowed David to accumulate wealth far beyond what his legal practice could generate legitimately, while providing Carradine with access to the banking and investment systems that facilitated large-scale money laundering. The partnership represented a level of criminal sophistication that would attract federal racketeering charges carrying mandatory life sentences. The documents Eleanor had assembled revealed that several other partners at Sterling and Associates were involved in the money laundering scheme, creating a criminal conspiracy that extended throughout one of Westfield's most respected law firms. This information explained how David had been able to operate his various fraudulent schemes without detection by his colleagues, as they were equally invested in maintaining the firm's criminal activities. The involvement of multiple partners also meant that the entire firm would likely be shut down by federal prosecutors, destroying the professional lives of everyone associated with the practice. Eleanor's most shocking revelation concerned David's relationship with Amanda Ross, which had been orchestrated by Carradine as part of a broader scheme to compromise David's judgment and increase his dependence on the criminal organization. Amanda had been working as an informant for Carradine long before she joined Sterling & Associates, with her seduction of David being carefully planned to ensure his continued cooperation with the money laundering operations. David's affair hadn't been a romantic relationship, but a sophisticated criminal manipulation designed to ensure his loyalty through blackmail and emotional dependence. The evidence Eleanor provided revealed that Amanda had been recording David's conversations and photographing confidential documents throughout their relationship, creating a comprehensive blackmail file that Carradine could use to ensure David's continued cooperation. This material included recordings of David discussing his various criminal schemes, photographs of client files containing sensitive information, and video evidence of David's participation in activities that would destroy his professional reputation and personal relationships. David had unknowingly provided his criminal associates with everything they needed to control him completely. Eleanor's investigation had also uncovered evidence that David was being prepared for elimination by Carradine's organization once his usefulness expired, with Amanda being positioned to inherit his assets through careful estate planning that would transfer his wealth to accounts controlled by the criminal network. The murder planning evidence that Ryan had discovered wasn't David's independent decision, but part of a broader scheme by Carradine to eliminate loose ends while seizing the assets that David had accumulated through his criminal activities. Wednesday. Morning brought Eleanor and me to a secure meeting with Jessica Chen, Detective Rodriguez, and federal agents who had been investigating Carradine's operations for over 3 years. Eleanor's evidence provided the missing pieces that federal prosecutors needed to build comprehensive racketeering cases against the entire criminal network, while ensuring that David faced charges as both a perpetrator and a victim of the conspiracy. Her cooperation would be crucial for understanding the full scope of the criminal enterprise and identifying all of its participants. The federal agents revealed that David had been under surveillance as part of their investigation into Carradine's network, but they hadn't realized the extent of his involvement until Eleanor provided her evidence. The Bureau had been focusing on the money laundering aspects of the conspiracy, while missing the blackmail, fraud, and planned murder elements that David's case revealed. Eleanor's investigation had essentially provided federal prosecutors with a complete roadmap for dismantling one of New England's most sophisticated criminal organizations. The meeting also revealed that Amanda Ross had been cooperating with federal investigators for several months, providing information about Carradine's operations in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Her relationship with David had been part of an FBI undercover operation designed to gather evidence against the criminal network, meaning that David's affair had been monitored and recorded by federal agents from its inception. The romantic relationship that David thought was his secret had actually been a federal investigation that would provide the evidence needed to convict him of multiple felonies. Eleanor's revelation that Amanda was a federal informant transformed our understanding of David's situation completely. His confidence in their relationship and his willingness to share criminal plans with her had provided federal prosecutors with detailed evidence of his participation in multiple criminal schemes. The prenuptial agreement violations that had initially seemed so significant were now minor compared to the federal charges that David would face, based on evidence he had unknowingly provided to law enforcement. Thursday brought additional revelations about the scope of Carradine's criminal network when Eleanor provided evidence that several prominent Connecticut politicians and judges had been receiving bribes in exchange for favorable treatment of cases involving the organization's members. This corruption had allowed the network to operate with impunity while building influence throughout the state's legal and political systems. David's participation in these schemes had made him a central figure in a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of Connecticut government. The political corruption evidence included photographs of cash payments, recordings of conversations about fixing cases, and financial records showing unexplained wealth accumulation by several public officials. Eleanor's social connections had provided her with access to information that would have taken federal investigators years to develop independently, accelerating the timeline for prosecuting the entire conspiracy. Her cooperation would likely result in the largest political corruption case in Connecticut history. Eleanor's investigation had also revealed that the criminal network had been planning to expand its operations into other states, using David's legal expertise and professional connections to establish money laundering operations in New York and Massachusetts. This expansion would have made David a key figure in an interstate criminal enterprise, increasing his federal charges and potential sentences significantly. His cooperation with the network had positioned him to become one of the most important criminals in New England, making his eventual prosecution a federal priority. Friday's meeting with federal prosecutors revealed the full scope of the charges that David would face once the investigation concluded. The racketeering charges alone carried mandatory life imprisonment, while the money laundering, fraud, and conspiracy charges would ensure that he never regained his freedom, even if he avoided conviction on the most serious allegations. The federal case would make the prenuptial agreement enforcement proceedings irrelevant, as all of David's assets would be forfeited as proceeds of criminal activity. The prosecutors also revealed that Eleanor would receive substantial financial rewards for her cooperation with the federal investigation, as whistleblower statutes provided compensation for civilians who assisted in major criminal cases. These payments would exceed the value of David's legitimate assets, ensuring that Eleanor's decision to expose her son's criminality would be financially beneficial as well as morally justified. The federal government's gratitude for her assistance would also provide her with protection from any retaliation attempts by surviving members of the criminal network. Eleanor's transformation from concerned mother to federal informant represented the complete collapse of David's support systems within his own family. His mother's decision to cooperate with law enforcement demonstrated that his criminal activities had alienated even those who should have been most loyal to him. The psychological impact of this betrayal would likely be more devastating to David than any prison sentence or financial penalty. The weekend brought final preparations for David's arrest, which would occur Monday morning with maximum publicity to demonstrate federal law enforcement's commitment to prosecuting white-collar crime. Eleanor's evidence would be presented to grand juries in 3 states, resulting in indictments that would ensure David's prosecution in multiple jurisdictions. His legal expertise would prove useless against the comprehensive federal case that had been built with his mother's assistance and his mistress's cooperation. Sunday evening found Eleanor and me reviewing the final details of our strategy for protecting family assets from federal forfeiture, while ensuring that David faced appropriate consequences for his criminal activities. Her sophisticated understanding of asset protection laws and federal forfeiture procedures would prove invaluable for navigating the complex legal issues that would arise once David's prosecution began. The woman who had raised him would now orchestrate his complete downfall with the same attention to detail that had made her one of Westfield's most respected social leaders. Monday morning arrived with unseasonably cold weather that seemed appropriate for the systematic dismantling of David's carefully constructed criminal empire. The secure conference room at Jessica Chen's law office had been transformed into a war room, with multiple computer monitors displaying financial records, surveillance photographs, and legal documents that collectively painted a picture of criminal activity so comprehensive that even experienced prosecutors expressed amazement at its scope and sophistication. Michael Torres had worked through the weekend to complete his forensic analysis of the financial evidence, producing a report that documented over $8 million in criminal proceeds that David had laundered through legitimate investments and business ventures. The complexity of his money laundering schemes had required the expertise of multiple criminal organizations and demonstrated a level of financial sophistication that elevated his case from simple fraud to international organized crime. Each transaction had been carefully structured to avoid detection while maximizing the criminal proceeds that could be integrated into legitimate financial systems. The forensic accounting report revealed that David had been operating essentially as a criminal bank, accepting deposits from various criminal enterprises and investing the proceeds through legitimate channels that would obscure their origins. His law practice had provided the perfect cover for these activities, as attorney-client privilege protected his communications with criminal clients, while his professional reputation ensured that financial institutions didn't scrutinize his transactions carefully. The legitimate aspects of his legal practice had been used to facilitate crimes that generated more income than his law firm could produce through legitimate activities. Ryan's digital forensics analysis had recovered over 10,000 deleted files from David's computers and mobile devices, creating a comprehensive record of his criminal activities that spanned 4 years and involved dozens of criminal associates. The recovered communications revealed detailed planning for crimes that hadn't yet been executed, providing law enforcement with intelligence that could prevent future criminal activities while demonstrating David's central role in planning and coordinating various illegal schemes. The digital evidence included encrypted communications with criminal associates in 12 states and 4 countries, revealing the international scope of David's criminal network and his role as a coordinator for complex, multi-jurisdictional crimes. His legal expertise had made him invaluable for structuring criminal schemes that could operate across state and national boundaries while avoiding prosecution in any single jurisdiction. The international aspects of his criminal activities would trigger federal prosecution under terrorism and national security statutes that carried enhanced penalties. Dr. Emma Foster's psychological analysis of David's behavior patterns had revealed evidence of antisocial personality disorder with narcissistic features, providing prosecutors with expert testimony about his likelihood of reoffending and the threat he represented to public safety. Her evaluation suggested that David's criminal activities represented a fundamental character disorder rather than situational misconduct, making rehabilitation unlikely and supporting arguments for maximum sentencing under federal guidelines. The psychological evaluation also revealed that David had been grooming several junior associates and paralegals for recruitment into his criminal schemes, using the same manipulation techniques he had employed with Amanda Ross. These recruitment efforts represented additional charges for conspiracy and corruption of public officials, as several of his targets were employed by government agencies and could have provided access to sensitive law enforcement information. Tuesday brought the completion of Detective Rodriguez's investigation into David's local criminal activities, which had identified connections to drug trafficking organizations, illegal gambling operations, and human trafficking networks operating throughout Connecticut. David's legal services had been used to facilitate all of these activities, making him a central figure in Connecticut's organized crime network and ensuring that his prosecution would receive priority attention from federal law enforcement agencies. The local investigation had also revealed that David had been using his position on several charitable organization boards to facilitate money laundering through fake donations and grant programs. These activities had allowed criminal organizations to claim tax deductions for illegal proceeds, while building community goodwill that protected them from law enforcement scrutiny. David's participation in these schemes had violated the trust of numerous charitable organizations while facilitating crimes that hurt the most vulnerable members of the community. Eleanor's continued investigation had produced additional evidence of political corruption involving the mayor's office, county prosecutor, and several federal court employees who had been accepting bribes in exchange for favorable treatment of cases involving David's criminal associates. The scope of this corruption had essentially created a criminal justice system within Connecticut that operated for the benefit of organized crime rather than public safety. Wednesday's federal grand jury proceedings resulted in sealed indictments against David and 47 other defendants, creating one of the largest organized crime prosecutions in Connecticut history. The charges included racketeering, money laundering, fraud, conspiracy, bribery, and terrorism-related offenses that carried potential sentences totaling over 300 years in federal prison. David's central role in the criminal organization had made him a primary target for prosecution under federal organized crime statutes. The grand jury evidence had also triggered asset forfeiture proceedings against all property connected to the criminal enterprise, including David's legitimate assets that had been purchased with money earned through legal practice that was used to facilitate criminal activities. Federal prosecutors had obtained seizure warrants for every account, property, and investment that David controlled, ensuring that he would have no access to funds for legal representation or living expenses once his arrest occurred. Thursday brought the revelation that David's criminal activities had attracted the attention of international law enforcement agencies, as his money laundering operations had involved banks and financial institutions in Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, and Luxembourg. These international connections had triggered cooperation agreements with foreign prosecutors that would ensure David's extradition to face charges in multiple countries if he attempted to flee American jurisdiction. The international evidence revealed that David had been helping terrorist organizations and drug cartels move money through American financial systems, activities that would trigger prosecution under national security statutes carrying mandatory death sentences. His legal expertise had been used to structure financial transactions that threatened American national security, while generating enormous profits for international criminal organizations. Friday's final evidence compilation revealed that David had been planning to eliminate several potential witnesses against him, including former clients who had discovered his criminal activities and threatened to expose him to law enforcement. The murder planning extended far beyond his intentions regarding me, encompassing a conspiracy to commit multiple homicides that would have established him as one of Connecticut's most dangerous criminals. The witness elimination plans included detailed surveillance of targets, research into methods for causing untraceable deaths, and coordination with professional killers who had been hired to execute the murders once David provided final approval. These plans represented the most serious charges in the federal indictment and would ensure that David faced death penalty proceedings regardless of his cooperation with law enforcement. The comprehensive evidence assembled over the past 2 weeks had transformed David from a cheating husband who violated his prenuptial agreement into the central figure in one of the largest organized crime prosecutions in American history. His confidence in his legal expertise and the protection provided by our prenuptial agreement had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how federal racketeering laws would interact with his criminal activities. The prenuptial agreement that David had crafted so carefully to protect his assets had become irrelevant once federal prosecutors identified him as the leader of an international criminal organization. His legitimate assets would be forfeited as proceeds of criminal activity, while his hidden criminal proceeds would be seized as evidence of his guilt. The man who had thought he could manipulate the legal system to his advantage was about to face the full weight of federal law enforcement with no resources for defense and no hope for escape. The news of David's impending arrest had spread through Westfield's legal community faster than anyone anticipated, triggering an avalanche of former clients and colleagues who came forward with their own stories of victimization and criminal misconduct. Jessica Chen's office became a gathering point for individuals who had been afraid to speak out against one of Connecticut's most powerful attorneys, but who now saw an opportunity to seek justice for years of exploitation and abuse. Margaret Holloway was the first to contact us Tuesday morning, her voice shaking as she described how David had stolen over $200,000 from her divorce settlement while representing her husband in contentious proceedings. Margaret had suspected the theft for months, but hadn't been able to prove David's misconduct until our investigation provided the framework for understanding his criminal methods. Her case represented one of dozens of similar thefts that David had committed against vulnerable clients during highly emotional family law proceedings. Margaret's evidence included financial records showing transfers from her settlement account to David's personal investments, along with forged documents that David had used to justify the unauthorized transactions. Her willingness to testify provided prosecutors with direct evidence of David's theft from client accounts, crimes that carried substantial federal sentences and professional sanctions. Her case also demonstrated the systematic nature of David's criminal activities, as he had used similar methods to steal from numerous clients over several years. The second victim to come forward was Dr. Patricia Williams, a prominent Westfield physician who had hired David to handle her medical practice's legal affairs, only to discover that he had been using her professional credentials to facilitate prescription drug trafficking. Dr. Williams had unknowingly signed documents that David claimed were routine legal paperwork, but which actually authorized the distribution of controlled substances to criminal associates who operated illegal pharmacy operations throughout Connecticut. Dr. Williams's case revealed another dimension of David's criminal enterprise, as he had been recruiting professional clients to provide services and credentials that facilitated various illegal activities. Her medical license had been used to authorize prescriptions that generated millions of dollars for drug trafficking organizations, while her legitimate practice provided cover for criminal activities that she had never suspected. Her cooperation would provide prosecutors with evidence of David's role in drug trafficking conspiracies that carried mandatory life sentences. Wednesday brought forward Thomas Morrison, a retired federal judge who had hired David to manage his estate planning and retirement investments, only to discover that his entire life savings had been diverted to offshore accounts controlled by criminal organizations. Judge Morrison's case was particularly significant because his theft represented an attack on the federal judiciary that would trigger enhanced prosecution under terrorism statutes designed to protect government officials. Judge Morrison's evidence revealed that David had been specifically targeting retired judges and prosecutors for financial exploitation, using their trust in the legal system to facilitate thefts that funded criminal activities threatening national security. The systematic targeting of former law enforcement officials demonstrated that David's criminal organization viewed the justice system as an enemy to be attacked rather than a legal framework to be respected. Thursday's victims included Sarah Peterson, a local business owner who had discovered that David had been using her restaurant chain to launder money for drug trafficking organizations without her knowledge or consent. David had convinced her to accept large cash payments from fake customers who were actually criminal associates, laundering illegal proceeds through legitimate business transactions. Her business had unknowingly processed over $3 million in criminal proceeds, making her an unwitting participant in money laundering conspiracies that could have resulted in her own prosecution. Sarah's case revealed the sophisticated methods David had used to recruit legitimate businesses for criminal activities, convincing honest business owners to participate in schemes that appeared to be normal commercial transactions, but which actually facilitated major criminal enterprises. Her cooperation would provide prosecutors with evidence of David's money laundering methods, while protecting her from prosecution as an unwitting participant in criminal conspiracies. The most shocking victim testimony came from Rebecca Chen, Jessica's younger sister, who revealed that David had been blackmailing her with compromising photographs taken during a brief relationship they had years before his marriage to me. Rebecca had been making monthly payments to David for over 3 years, believing that exposure of their relationship would destroy her career as a federal prosecutor. Her case revealed that David had been systematically blackmailing numerous women throughout Westfield's professional community. Rebecca's evidence included recordings of conversations where David had explicitly threatened to destroy her career unless she continued making payments and providing confidential information about federal investigations that might threaten his criminal associates. Her position as a federal prosecutor had made her particularly valuable to David's criminal organization, as she could provide advance warning about law enforcement activities while ensuring that certain investigations were delayed or misdirected. Friday brought forward the most significant victim group when 12 former employees of Sterling & Associates filed a joint complaint alleging that David had been operating the law firm as a criminal enterprise that systematically exploited employees while using their professional credentials to facilitate various illegal activities. These employees had been threatened with career destruction if they reported David's misconduct, creating a culture of fear that had protected his criminal activities for years. The employee testimony revealed that David had been requiring junior attorneys and paralegals to participate in criminal activities as a condition of employment, using their professional licenses and credentials to provide legitimacy for schemes that generated more income than the firm's legitimate legal practice. Employees who refused to participate were fired and blacklisted from other legal positions, while those who cooperated were gradually drawn deeper into criminal activities until they became full participants in the conspiracy. The weekend brought victim testimony from law enforcement officials who had been corrupted by David's criminal organization, including Detective James Riley from the Westfield Police Department, who admitted accepting bribes in exchange for providing advance warning about investigations targeting David's criminal associates. Detective Riley's cooperation provided prosecutors with evidence of the extensive police corruption that had protected David's criminal activities while threatening public safety throughout Connecticut. The police corruption evidence revealed that David had been operating with virtual immunity from local law enforcement, as corrupt officers provided protection for his criminal activities while ensuring that investigations were sabotaged or misdirected. This protection had allowed David's criminal organization to operate openly, while legitimate law enforcement efforts were undermined by officers who prioritized criminal payments over their duty to protect public safety. The comprehensive victim testimony assembled over 1 week had revealed that David's criminal activities had affected hundreds of people throughout Connecticut and beyond, creating a network of victimization that extended throughout the legal, medical, business, and law enforcement communities. His systematic exploitation of professional relationships had damaged the integrity of multiple institutions while generating enormous profits for criminal organizations that threatened national security. The victim's willingness to testify had provided prosecutors with evidence that would ensure David's conviction on multiple felony charges while demonstrating the devastating impact his criminal activities had on individuals and communities throughout Connecticut. Their courage in coming forward had transformed David from a successful attorney who violated his prenuptial agreement into a criminal defendant facing prosecution for crimes that had hurt hundreds of innocent people. The prenuptial agreement, violations that had initially motivated our investigation, had become insignificant compared to the massive criminal conspiracy that the victim testimony had revealed. David's confidence in his legal immunity had been based on his assumption that his victims would remain silent, but their decision to seek justice had provided prosecutors with overwhelming evidence of his guilt while ensuring that he would face consequences proportionate to the enormous harm he had caused. The first sign that David sensed something had changed came Thursday morning when he discovered that his access to several client trust accounts had been restricted pending what the bank described as routine compliance reviews. His carefully controlled facade cracked slightly as he made increasingly agitated phone calls to bank officials who provided vague explanations about regulatory requirements and processing delays. I watched from my office as David paced his workspace across the hall, his confident demeanor replaced by visible anxiety that he couldn't quite conceal from his colleagues. Amanda Ross had begun exhibiting similar signs of stress, her usually perfect appearance showing subtle cracks that suggested sleepless nights and growing paranoia. Her interactions with other staff members had become increasingly tense, particularly when discussions involved case files or financial records that might contain evidence of her participation in David's criminal activities. The casual confidence that had characterized her affair with David was being replaced by nervous glances and hurried conversations that ended abruptly when others approached. David's attempts to contact his criminal associates revealed the extent of his growing desperation, as encrypted communications that Ryan's surveillance had intercepted showed increasingly frantic requests for advice and assistance. Vincent Carradine and other members of the criminal organization had apparently decided that David had become a liability, as their responses were evasive and non-committal rather than the supportive reassurances he clearly expected. The criminal network that had provided David with protection and resources was beginning to distance itself from his activities. Friday brought more obvious signs of David's deteriorating position when Detective Rodriguez's Financial Crimes Unit executed search warrants at Sterling & Associates under the pretext of investigating unrelated fraud allegations. David's behavior during the search was professionally appropriate but personally revealing, as he closely monitored which documents and computers were being examined while attempting to determine the scope of the investigation. His questions to the officers were carefully phrased to avoid admitting knowledge of criminal activities while gathering intelligence about the evidence being sought. The law firm search had been carefully choreographed to apply pressure on David without revealing the full scope of the federal investigation, creating uncertainty that would force him to make potentially incriminating decisions about protecting or destroying evidence. Eleanor's inside knowledge of David's psychological patterns had predicted that he would react to pressure by attempting to accelerate his criminal activities rather than ceasing them, providing additional evidence of his guilt while demonstrating his lack of judgment under stress. Amanda's reaction to the law firm search revealed her own awareness that their criminal activities were being investigated, as she immediately began deleting files and communications that could connect her to David's schemes. However, her technical skills were insufficient to eliminate evidence from systems that were already under federal surveillance, and her destruction efforts actually provided additional proof of her consciousness of guilt. Her attempts to distance herself from David professionally were undermined by evidence that she had been an active participant in planning future criminal activities. The weekend brought David's first direct attempt to determine whether I suspected his criminal activities, as he casually mentioned the law firm search while probing for my reaction to his legal troubles. His performance was skillful but not perfect, as years of marriage had taught me to recognize the subtle tells that indicated when he was lying or attempting manipulation. My responses were carefully neutral, providing no indication that I possessed comprehensive evidence of his criminal activities while encouraging him to continue incriminating himself through additional admissions. David's attempt to gauge my knowledge extended to searching my computer and office for evidence that I had been investigating his activities, but his efforts revealed that he still underestimated my technical sophistication and strategic planning. The evidence I had assembled was stored on secure systems that he couldn't access, while the materials he could find had been carefully selected to mislead him about the scope and focus of my investigation. His search efforts actually provided additional evidence of his consciousness of guilt while revealing his desperation to control information that could destroy him. Sunday brought David's most direct attempt at manipulation when he suggested that we should consider relocating to a jurisdiction without extradition treaties with the United States, presenting the idea as a romantic opportunity for international travel and cultural enrichment. His proposal revealed that he understood the international scope of his criminal activities while demonstrating his willingness to flee prosecution rather than face the consequences of his actions. My positive response encouraged him to continue planning what would ultimately become additional evidence of flight risk that prosecutors could use to justify his detention without bail. Amanda's parallel attempts to prepare for potential prosecution revealed through surveillance that she had been consulting with criminal defense attorneys while researching witness protection programs and immunity agreements. Her efforts to negotiate cooperation with law enforcement had apparently been encouraged by federal agents who were using her information to build stronger cases against David and other members of the criminal organization. Her willingness to betray David demonstrated that their romantic relationship had been based entirely on criminal convenience rather than genuine emotional attachment. Monday morning brought David's decision to accelerate his timeline for eliminating potential witnesses against him, as intercepted communications revealed that he had contacted professional killers to discuss the immediate execution of contracts that had previously been planned for future implementation. His decision to move forward with murder plans demonstrated both his awareness that prosecution was imminent and his commitment to violent crime as a solution to legal problems. The acceleration of his murder timeline also provided federal agents with justification for immediate arrest rather than continued surveillance. The evidence of David's accelerated murder plans included specific discussions about eliminating me, Eleanor, and several former clients who had provided evidence about his criminal activities. His communications with hired killers revealed detailed planning for murders that would appear to be accidents or random crimes, demonstrating a level of criminal sophistication that would ensure prosecution under federal terrorism statutes. His willingness to murder family members showed that his criminal activities had completely overwhelmed any remaining moral constraints. Amanda's final attempt to secure immunity from prosecution revealed that she had been recording conversations with David throughout their relationship at the direction of federal agents, providing prosecutors with real-time evidence of his criminal planning and decision-making processes. Her cooperation had been far more extensive than David realized, as she had essentially been conducting an undercover operation that captured his criminal activities in unprecedented detail. The recordings would provide prosecutors with direct evidence of David's guilt while demonstrating his leadership role in the criminal organization. Tuesday brought David's last desperate attempt to maintain control over his deteriorating situation when he attempted to transfer millions of dollars from hidden accounts to jurisdictions beyond the reach of American law enforcement. However, his financial transactions were being monitored in real time by federal agents who immediately froze the accounts and seized the funds as evidence of money laundering and flight preparation. His attempt to secure criminal proceeds actually provided additional evidence of his guilt while eliminating his resources for funding either an escape or an effective legal defense. The comprehensive surveillance of David and Amanda during their final week of freedom had provided federal prosecutors with detailed evidence of their consciousness of guilt, their attempts to destroy evidence, and their planning for violent crimes that would have resulted in multiple murders. Their behavior under pressure had revealed the true extent of their criminal enterprise, while demonstrating that they represented ongoing threats to public safety that justified immediate intervention by law enforcement. The prenuptial agreement that David had trusted to protect him from the consequences of his infidelity had become irrelevant as federal prosecutors prepared to arrest him for crimes that carried mandatory life sentences. His legal expertise had failed to anticipate how his criminal activities would interact with federal racketeering laws, while his confidence in his ability to manipulate the system had led him to create comprehensive evidence of his own guilt. The man who had thought he could cheat on his wife without consequences was about to face justice for crimes that threatened the safety and security of hundreds of innocent people. The secure operations center that federal agents had established in an unmarked building near Westfield's courthouse hummed with activity as dozens of law enforcement professionals coordinated the largest organized crime takedown in Connecticut history. Wednesday morning found me standing before wall-mounted displays showing surveillance photographs, organizational charts, and arrest timelines that would culminate in David's capture within 48 hours. The magnitude of the operation was staggering, involving over 200 federal agents, state police officers, and international law enforcement personnel who would execute synchronized arrests across 3 countries. Special Agent Patricia Kane, the federal prosecutor leading the racketeering case, had requested my presence to finalize the evidence presentation that would be used during David's initial court appearance. The comprehensive documentation that our investigation had assembled would serve as the foundation for denying bail, while demonstrating the international scope of David's criminal enterprise. Agent Kane's experience prosecuting organized crime leaders had taught her that successful cases required overwhelming evidence presented with precision timing that prevented defendants from mounting effective challenges. The evidence presentation included over 8,000 pages of financial records, surveillance transcripts, victim testimony, and digital forensics that collectively painted David as the central coordinator of criminal activities spanning multiple continents. Each piece of evidence had been carefully authenticated and cross-referenced to ensure that defense attorneys couldn't challenge its admissibility or accuracy during trial proceedings. The thoroughness of our documentation would prevent David from claiming ignorance or minimizing his role in the criminal conspiracy. Eleanor Mitchell's final briefing to federal agents revealed additional details about David's international criminal connections that hadn't been previously documented. Her social network within Connecticut's elite circles had provided access to information about offshore banking relationships and foreign criminal associates that would have taken law enforcement years to develop independently. Her cooperation had essentially provided federal prosecutors with a roadmap for dismantling criminal operations that extended far beyond David's individual activities. The financial analysis completed by Michael Torres had identified criminal proceeds exceeding $15 million that David had laundered through legitimate investments and business ventures over the past 4 years. These funds would be subject to immediate forfeiture upon his arrest, ensuring that he had no resources for mounting an effective legal defense while providing compensation for his victims. The seizure of his assets would also prevent the criminal organization from accessing funds that could be used to eliminate witnesses or obstruct justice. Ryan's digital forensics team had completed their analysis of encrypted communications between David and his criminal associates, revealing detailed planning for crimes that hadn't yet been executed. This intelligence would allow law enforcement to prevent future criminal activities while demonstrating David's ongoing dangerousness to public safety. The intercepted communications also revealed the locations of evidence and criminal proceeds that would be seized during coordinated searches of properties associated with the criminal organization. Thursday brought the final coordination meeting between federal agents, state police, and international law enforcement agencies that would execute arrests in Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, and Luxembourg simultaneously with David's capture in Connecticut. The international cooperation represented unprecedented collaboration in prosecuting financial crimes that threatened multiple countries' banking systems and national security interests. David's criminal activities had achieved a level of international significance that would ensure maximum penalties under various terrorism and national security statutes. Detective Rodriguez's coordination with local law enforcement agencies had identified corrupt police officers and court personnel who would be arrested simultaneously with David to prevent them from warning criminal associates or destroying evidence. The scope of police corruption that David's organization had created required careful planning to ensure that honest law enforcement officers weren't compromised by information sharing with corrupted colleagues. The cleanup of local law enforcement would restore public confidence while eliminating protection that had allowed the criminal organization to operate with impunity. Amanda Ross's final debriefing with federal agents revealed that David had been planning to eliminate her once his murder contracts were executed, viewing her as a liability who possessed too much information about his criminal activities. Her cooperation with law enforcement had likely saved her life while providing prosecutors with evidence that would ensure David's conviction on multiple murder conspiracy charges. Her recorded conversations with David contained explicit discussions of planned murders that would constitute direct evidence of his guilt. The psychological evaluation completed by Dr. Emma Foster had determined that David represented an extreme threat to public safety due to his complete lack of remorse and his willingness to use violence to protect his criminal interests. Her assessment would support prosecution arguments for maximum sentencing while demonstrating that rehabilitation was impossible given David's fundamental character disorders. The evaluation would also justify holding David in maximum security facilities to prevent him from continuing criminal activities while awaiting trial. Friday morning brought the final review of arrest procedures that would begin at dawn on Monday, with synchronized raids on properties associated with David's criminal organization. The timing had been carefully calculated to prevent David from implementing his planned murders while ensuring that evidence couldn't be destroyed before searches were completed. Federal agents had been conducting surveillance of all potential targets to ensure their safety while monitoring David's communications for any indication that he suspected the impending arrests. The arrest warrants included charges for racketeering, money laundering, murder conspiracy, terrorism, fraud, bribery, and dozens of other felonies that collectively carried potential sentences exceeding 400 years in federal prison. The comprehensive nature of the charges would prevent David from negotiating reduced sentences through cooperation agreements, while ensuring that he faced consequences proportionate to the enormous harm his criminal activities had caused. His legal expertise would prove useless against the overwhelming evidence that had been assembled through our investigation. Jessica Chen's final legal analysis confirmed that the prenuptial agreement enforcement proceedings would continue parallel to the criminal prosecution, ensuring that I recovered damages for David's marital misconduct regardless of the outcome of his criminal trial. The civil proceedings would provide additional pressure on David while demonstrating that his violations of our marriage contract carried consequences separate from his criminal activities. The prenup's penalty clauses would remain enforceable, even if David's assets were forfeited to the federal government. Saturday brought my final meeting with Eleanor Mitchell, who had decided to relocate to Florida immediately after David's arrest to avoid media attention and potential retaliation. From surviving members of the criminal organization, her cooperation with federal law enforcement had earned her substantial financial rewards, while protecting her from prosecution for any unknowing assistance she might have provided to David's criminal activities. Her decision to expose her son's crimes had required enormous courage, but had ultimately protected hundreds of potential victims from future harm. The weekend also brought final security arrangements for my protection during the weeks following David's arrest, as federal agents anticipated that surviving members of the criminal organization might attempt retaliation against key witnesses. My cooperation had made me a valuable target for elimination, requiring protection measures that would continue until all members of the organization were captured or eliminated. The level of security required demonstrated the serious nature of the threats that David's criminal activities had created. Sunday evening found me reviewing the comprehensive documentation of David's criminal activities one final time, marveling at the scope of deception and criminality that had been hidden beneath his facade of professional respectability. The man I had married had never actually existed, replaced long ago by a criminal who viewed our marriage as nothing more than cover for activities that threatened national security and public safety. The prenuptial agreement that he had used to justify his confidence in cheating had become a minor footnote in a criminal case that would reshape law enforcement approaches to organized crime. The final preparations were complete, with over 200 law enforcement personnel positioned to execute the largest coordinated arrest operation in Connecticut history. David's world would begin collapsing at dawn on Monday when federal agents surrounded his home while simultaneously arresting his criminal associates across 3 continents. His confidence in his legal immunity and the protection provided by our prenuptial agreement would be shattered by evidence that he had unknowingly provided through years of criminal communications that law enforcement had been monitoring. Monday. Mourning would bring justice for hundreds of victims while demonstrating that no criminal organization was too sophisticated or well-connected to escape prosecution when law enforcement agencies coordinated their efforts effectively. David's arrest would mark the beginning of trials that would reshape public understanding of how organized crime operated within professional communities, while sending a clear message that corruption would be prosecuted regardless of the social status or professional credentials of the perpetrators. The first indication that David suspected the true scope of the investigation came at 4:30 Monday morning, when federal surveillance detected him leaving our home through the basement exit. Avoiding the front door cameras, he didn't realize had been replaced with law enforcement monitoring equipment weeks earlier. His destination was a storage facility in Hartford, where he had apparently hidden additional evidence and financial resources that he believed could help him escape prosecution or eliminate witnesses who threatened his freedom. Federal agents had been monitoring the storage facility for days, documenting David's visits and cataloging the contents of his unit through sophisticated surveillance equipment that revealed weapons, false identification documents, and detailed assassination plans targeting 12 individuals who could testify against him. His early morning visit was intended to retrieve items necessary for implementing his murder plans before law enforcement could arrest him, but agents were already in position to observe and record his activities without interfering with his evidence collection. The storage unit contained over $2 million in cash, precious metals, and bearer bonds that David had accumulated as an emergency fund for escaping prosecution, along with multiple passports and identification documents that would allow him to assume false identities in countries without extradition treaties. His preparation for flight demonstrated consciousness of guilt, while providing additional evidence of money laundering and passport fraud that would increase his potential sentences significantly. Amanda Ross's simultaneous attempt to access a different storage facility revealed that she had been maintaining her own escape preparations despite her cooperation with federal law enforcement. Her unit contained evidence that she had been conducting unauthorized communications with foreign criminal associates, potentially compromising the federal investigation while positioning herself to profit from information she had gathered during her undercover work. Her apparent betrayal of both David and law enforcement demonstrated the complete absence of loyalty or moral constraints that characterized everyone involved in the criminal organization. By 6 a.m., David had returned home and begun making encrypted phone calls to criminal associates who could help him implement his emergency escape plans. However, his communications were being intercepted in real time by federal agents who were using his conversations to identify additional members of the criminal organization while gathering evidence of conspiracy charges that would ensure maximum sentences for all participants. David's desperation was providing law enforcement with intelligence that would have taken years to develop through traditional investigative methods. David's phone conversations revealed that the criminal organization had been planning to eliminate all evidence and witnesses related to their Connecticut operations, essentially conducting a scorched earth campaign that would leave dozens of people dead while allowing the leadership to escape to non-extradition countries. The scope of the planned violence demonstrated that David's organization represented a terrorist threat that justified immediate intervention by federal law enforcement, regardless of the status of ongoing investigations. The most chilling conversation occurred at 7:15 a.m. when David confirmed arrangements for my murder, scheduled to occur during my normal commute to work through what would appear to be a random traffic accident. Professional killers had been positioned along my usual route with instructions to execute the contract immediately upon receiving final authorization from David. Only the presence of federal protective agents prevented the assassination attempt from proceeding as planned. Amanda's parallel communications revealed that she had been providing David's criminal associates with detailed information about federal investigation methods and evidence-gathering techniques, potentially compromising other ongoing cases while helping criminals develop more sophisticated methods for avoiding detection. Her betrayal of law enforcement represented a level of cynicism that justified prosecution for treason and terrorism rather than simple cooperation with organized crime. 8 a.m. brought David's decision to accelerate all planned murders from a timeline spanning several weeks to immediate execution within hours, as he apparently believed that eliminating witnesses quickly would prevent federal prosecutors from building strong cases against him. His authorization of multiple contract killings demonstrated a complete willingness to use mass murder as a litigation strategy, elevating his criminal activities to terrorist levels that would justify prosecution under national security statutes. The federal response was immediate and overwhelming, with tactical teams deploying to protect all potential victims, while arrest teams moved to capture David and his associates before any murders could be executed. The operation involved over 300 law enforcement personnel, executing synchronized actions across Connecticut and 12 other states, representing the largest domestic law enforcement operation in recent history. David's arrest occurred at 8:47 a.m. as he attempted to leave Connecticut using false identification documents and a vehicle that had been modified to conceal weapons and criminal proceeds. Federal agents had been monitoring his movements since dawn, allowing him to commit additional crimes while gathering evidence before executing the arrest warrant. His attempted flight provided final proof of consciousness of guilt while ensuring that he would be held without bail as a flight risk. The search of David's vehicle revealed detailed maps showing the planned locations for 12 murders, along with photographs and personal information about each intended victim that had been provided by corrupt law enforcement personnel who were arrested simultaneously with David. The murder planning materials constituted direct evidence of terrorism conspiracy that would ensure prosecution under statutes carrying mandatory death sentences. Amanda's arrest occurred simultaneously at her apartment, where agents discovered evidence that she had been planning to eliminate federal agents who had been handling her cooperation agreement. Her betrayal of law enforcement while maintaining her cover as a cooperating witness represented sophisticated criminal thinking that demonstrated her value to the organization extended far beyond her romantic relationship with David. Her arrest prevented potential murders of federal agents while revealing the extent of corruption within the investigation itself. The arrests of David's criminal associates revealed that the organization had been planning attacks on federal courthouses and law enforcement facilities throughout Connecticut, intending to create chaos that would allow leadership to escape while eliminating evidence and witnesses. The terrorist nature of these plans justified treating the organization as a domestic terrorist group rather than simply a criminal enterprise, triggering enhanced prosecution procedures and national security investigations. Noon brought the execution of search warrants at Sterling & Associates, where agents discovered that the entire law firm had been operating as a criminal enterprise, with every partner participating in various illegal activities. The scope of the conspiracy required immediate closure of the firm and arrest of all partners, paralegals, and support staff who had facilitated criminal activities. The destruction of one of Connecticut's most prestigious law firms demonstrated the comprehensive nature of David's criminal organization. The search of David's home office revealed additional evidence that he had been planning to murder federal agents, prosecutors, and judges who might be assigned to his case, viewing the elimination of law enforcement and judicial personnel as necessary for protecting his criminal organization. His planning for attacks on the justice system itself represented terrorism that would ensure prosecution under statutes designed to protect national security and governmental functions. 2 p.m. brought the discovery that David had been coordinating with international terrorist organizations to provide financial services and money laundering capabilities in exchange for protection and assistance with eliminating law enforcement threats. His connections to international terrorism elevated his case from organized crime to national security matters that would involve multiple federal agencies and international cooperation agreements. The international connections revealed through David's communications included relationships with groups designated as terrorist organizations by the United States government, making his activities subject to terrorism statutes that carried mandatory death sentences. His provision of financial services to terrorist groups demonstrated that his criminal activities threatened national security interests beyond simple organized crime. Evening brought the revelation that David's organization had been planning coordinated attacks on multiple federal facilities throughout New England, intending to create sufficient chaos to allow the leadership to escape while eliminating evidence and witnesses who could testify against them. The scope of the planned terrorism required immediate coordination with national security agencies while ensuring that all potential targets received appropriate protection. The final evidence collected during David's desperate attempts to escape, prosecution revealed that his criminal organization had achieved a level of sophistication and international reach that posed genuine threats to national security and public safety. His willingness to use terrorism and mass murder to avoid prosecution demonstrated that his criminal activities had evolved far beyond simple financial crimes into threats that required the full attention of federal law enforcement and national security agencies. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.